Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Richard Barwell, the founder of Neurologically Based Chiropractic, coming to you with the BrainTrust group. And this is video number 2, and I'm really excited today. We have a snow day in Alabama, and there is some great things that happen about it. We get a chance to get Dr. Richard Aplin on the line. Dr. Aplin, it's great to see you, my friend.
It's good to see you too.
This Dr. Aplin is our lead instructor with the NeuroInfiniti training program. We've been involved in doing this for 20 years together. He was the first of the group that I suggested he buy this box and make it work, and he was the only guy that could make it work. And from there, we have been able to take that and run with it and develop the NeuroInfiniti and then the NeuroInfiniti 2 that we have now, and doing amazing stuff. Dr. Aplin, I'm really tickled pink to have you on today and get some of your time. But so that people know who you are, can you give us just a brief background on, number one, how did you get involved with chiropractic?
Okay, we were breaking up there, so I really didn't get what you were asking me.
Okay, maybe I'll talk a little slower, and we hope that the line works. Your background in chiropractic, how did you get involved in chiropractic, and what was it like then?
I got involved in chiropractic by getting involved in medicine. So, honestly, I was starting out, I was going to be a flight surgeon with the Air Force. I was going to the Air Force Academy. And so we turned that down. And so I knew all along, I've known since I was 3 years old that I was going to be a doctor. I just didn't know what kind of doctor. And so I went on to college, and I did I went through an accelerated program in college with the hopes of joining an MD PhD program in medical school. And when I got my 4-year degree in 3, they decided to drop the program. All right. And so, I continued on in that same direction toward medical school. And then a friend of mine called me up and asked me if I wanted to come to a get-together or a party. And I said, sure, where? And he said, Chicago. At the time, I was living in Mobile. And so I went, sure, why not? So I went to Chicago, and it was actually at the chiropractic school. I didn't know that that's what was going on. It was the homecoming for National College. And the first gentleman that I met was this elderly gentleman, and he was just very personable, and we spent a good bit of time talking. Come to find out, that was Dr. Joseph Chancey, who was the president of National College. And so he and I spoke quite a bit, and we spoke the next day, and he said, Rich, you don't belong where you are. He said, you belong here. And I thought, okay. And so that's the beginning of chiropractic. I'd never been to a chiropractor. Honestly, I didn't know what chiropractors were. I just knew they were doctors. And so after talking with him, I felt very at home, all right, with what he was saying. And that's the reason why I went. And
so when you graduated, what year was this?
Oh my gosh, it was what, in the last century? I graduated in 86. I got married in 85, graduated in 86, and immediately came back to Alabama and opened a practice in Huntsville. I've been in practice since, matter of fact, I just finished January the 12th was my 30th year.
Wow, congratulations, man. That's fantastic. You're leaving a mark too. It's you're changing the direction, and you're making a difference. I want you to know that. We graduated with that original concept in mind about chiropractic. It was
right.
Bone on nerve and moving vertebra. Something happened along the way with you. When did you finally start to get a different look at chiropractic?
Probably back in school, if you ask my professors. I was quite the questioner. When they would come out with this concept of bone on nerve, I really didn't understand it. And I said, there's got to be more to this. And that's honestly, it's been the driving force behind what I've done. I just don't want to accept what's on the surface. And so I kept pushing. Even when I was on that bone and nerve concept, I wanted to go farther than that because I saw things happen in the practice that shouldn't have happened. And I think anyone who's been in practice for some time has seen that. And so that's always left this question in my mind, is there something else? And that's the reason why I got involved with you in the NI program simply because you were on, at that time, the cutting edge. And honestly, now what we're doing, we're actually in front of the cutting edge.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to sort of watch the rest of them starting to catch up with neurological approaches in chiropractic. But with some of those changes, we're not seeing the application of chiropractic still being used. We're going to the other side of the neurology, where now it's becoming all about the wiring rather than the application of chiropractic as how it affects the wiring. How do you find that relates to what we're talking about in your practice?
You know, the biggest thing is people have to come to, I guess, grips with the concept that there's two different ways of thinking of issues. There's a very linear approach, which is historically what medicine's always been, and our scientific community is a very linear system. But the application of what we do is a linear mechanism applied to a nonlinear system. And so you're going to have to really question, how do I want to look at this? If I want to look at it linear, then I just stay in that one science and I go into the wiring, and it's the wiring that does it. But we know that that's not true, right? That's the reason why you can have 3 different doctors do 3 different adjustments and all get the same result.
So the nonlinear approach, you want to talk a bit about that as it applies to chiropractic so people can grab this?
Well, it's the concepts of systems analysis. You know, the sum is greater than, what is it? The entity is greater than the sum of the parts. Mm-hmm. So when you apply energy or knowledge or whatever you want to call that to the system, you have to be able to evaluate how the system is responding. You know, the old concept of bone on nerve was based on what, the 1920s with the Merrick system and Stevenson's work. But that's just not what happens. I mean, because you can't, if you use that kind of analysis or that kind of understanding, how could you possibly explain, you know, the fact that B.J. Palmer had some of the most successful results in dealing with cancer patients? You know, how can you explain all these chiropractors that worked on people that had tuberculosis and all these devastating diseases? You know, in my state, there was a nun who was a chiropractor who was specializing in adjusting people with active polio, and she was able to get rid of it. Well, that makes no sense.
Yeah, the nonlinear approach just kicked into, and even with BJ in a specific upper cervical, covering a wide host of problems. It wasn't following a nerve down and saying it was at this level. And so here we are as a profession, we get this, but that's not what the profession is represented by their actions out in the field. They're still looking at press here, press here.
Well, and again, I think it's simply because I don't know if it's any fault of our own. It's just the fact that we've adopted this linear way of explaining what we do. And honestly, it only works to a certain level.
So we had a breakthrough, and you were part of the breakthrough. You were there watching all the research that we did with Dr. Al Byers and Dr. Annette Long when we were doing the EEG work, pre and post adjustment, and seeing these dramatic, incredible changes in brain function from a single adjustment. And it didn't seem to matter which type of technique was used. It was more about which technique was most appropriate for the needs of the patient. Right. Just give us a little sort of feedback about what was going through your head when you were watching this.
Well, in the practice that I had at that time, I actually had a theoretical physicist that I was working with. We were doing research in homeopathy at that particular time. I was working with a group out of Salt Lake City. And when I got that piece of equipment and I was able to get it to run, I was working with this other doctor and I said, hey, why don't we just see what happens when we're working with homeopathic patients and see if we can change the way their brains actually work? And the answer is yes, we could. And then I went, okay, well, I want to see what happens when I adjust a person and then do some homeopathic work. And it was amazing. And so I went, wait, we've got to completely rethink this whole process of what we're actually doing. There is something way bigger than what we've ever thought going on between the doctor and the patient.
The homeopathy approach of if somebody's got some symptoms, you're going to give them something to stimulate even more of a response to those symptoms to kick the systems in gear. But just like chiropractic, they forgot that there's something above that was controlling all of that had to change.
Yeah.
And so getting this message across to chiropractors that we're not dealing with back pain or neck pain or curves or anything along that line that we've all been trained about and we've trained the public about, that we actually are dealing with that brain, that central nervous system, when we do the adjustment, has been a challenge. So how did you get past that? And especially I want to know how you get that past your patients to change the concept of chiropractic in your office.
You know, how I got past it is just that I continue to ask questions. You know, you and I had a conversation many, many years ago. It was after work late one night, and I was struggling with this, trying to define or create an identity. And you just point blank asked me on the phone, she goes, Rich, when you're dead and gone, what do you want people to remember? And I just off the cuff said, I want people to know that I changed the generational cycle of sickness and the diminishing expression of the human spirit. And I mean, the phone
Wait a
went.
minute, whoa. Go back and let's do that slowly, because that's important. I want people to hear that.
I want to change the generational cycle of sickness, which essentially means the way we think. And as a result, decrease the diminishing expression of the human spirit. And so, and when I said that, I mean, everything went silent. And then you said, that's it, that's your identity. And so everything that I have done since then has been designed to support that purpose. And this nonlinear approach that we use fits perfect. And so then I started working on trying to develop language skills, that I could use for people to understand exactly what we're talking about. And I was having a conversation last night with a doctor who's getting ready to do a webinar for an autoimmune disorder group. I said, one of the things you have to get people to understand is this issue of how much capacity you have to do work. And it on the surface, it may seem difficult, but honestly, patients totally understand this. Capacity is the amount that you have to be able to carry out a function. And as long as you have enough capacity to do the job, everything, when you get finished with the job, your net sum is zero. You get to start over again. But more and more people have less and less capacity to do work. That doesn't mean they don't do the work. It's just that they suffer the consequences of that. And over time, the systems start to fail, and that creates a disorder or a symptom pattern, which ultimately results in a disease. And then you go to a linear-based doctor, and he says, well, we need to control these expressions. And there's a complete disregard for the process that actually created the expression.
Yeah, I can relate to this as a 70-year-old working my way towards 80, that I can do the stuff that I used to be able to do, but if I do it at that rate, I pay for it trying to recover because I don't have the recovery ability any longer. It's just not there. My systems don't have it. So
Right.
People need to understand that. So let's go back and talk about how you communicate, especially things like the NBC approach to your patients and how you apply the NeuroInfiniti in your office.
Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I talk with the patients, and I share with them the fact that even our own government health agency says that over 90% of every condition is due to stress. And then I go, if over 90% is due to stress, why aren't we doing something about stress and forget all this other stuff? It seems to me that we'd have a better outcome. And the patients understand that. I go, so the problem is actually understanding what stress is. Most people think that stress is something that happens to you. And that's just not true. Stress is what you create when you do something. If you do it efficiently, you have less stress. If you do it inefficiently, you have more stress. And so honestly, it comes down to how does my body process things versus what happens to me. And so I haven't had a patient not understand this. Now, I will tell you this, I live in an area that is just a bunch of rocket scientists, but still, people get it. So then when they understand the fact that it's a process issue, then I explain how does all of our brains, how do we process information? You know, whether it be a physical event or a memory, you process it the same way. And, you know, we talk about that research. It was published years ago, that I believe it's a Dutch study. It was called Brain Economics. You know, and it says that the way we all process, we engage things with our brains, we deal with it, which is what they call resource allocation, and then we let go. And I explain whether or not, you know, as far as the recognizing and, you know, acknowledging what's going on, that's a reflex. How much space you have in your head is a constant. And so the only variable is whether or not you let go. And I go, and therein lies the problem. So the reason why chiropractic works so well is simply because it disrupts the pattern of not letting go.
It's that simple.
It's that simple. Now notice that I didn't talk about you have to adjust here, you have to do this technique. Chiropractic is about disrupting neural patterns. And by doing that, you have the opportunity to change the way the system processes. So
now you're into as a neurologically based chiropractic concept. You're in that level. As a chiropractor and as a doctor, okay? We have a problem within the profession where people only see themselves as chiropractors and they're only good about moving bones, and that's the job. Right. Now, I know that the philosophy group, they actually do think that they're doing something more, but they don't bother to explain it on that level. They follow the philosophy. But the majority of people are sort of stuck out there that after graduation with the tools that they were given of how to adjust the vertebrae and deal with back pain and neck pain. But then on the other side, way over the other way, we have taking care of your patients.
Right.
The patient sort of run with those three concepts.
All right. Again, we were sort of breaking up, so that last piece I didn't really get.
The doctor side over here, we have the basic chiropractor who thinks that all they do is structural work.
Right.
On nerve. We have the philosophy group who think that there's something more to it because of their philosophy, but they don't really get that brain connection. And then we have the people with that concept of being a doctor. That means that you should have a higher concept about your value and who you are and what you bring to the table than somebody that's just a structural doctor or somebody that's just a philosophy doctor. And I was just going to get you to sort of run with those three concepts and talk about the profession.
Well, you know, when I have a new patient come in and we sit down to do our discovery report, the first thing that I explain to the patient is the purpose of today's visit is to answer that one looming question that virtually every new patient has, and that is, can you help me? And I said, and based on the information that we were able to glean from your evaluation, your history, all the diagnostics that we did, the answer is I feel very confident that we can. Now, how we go about doing that may be different than what you have done in the past. Because understand, it's all about how you process. The application of what I do is directed toward improving the way you process. And if you think about when we do our job, all right, we literally free up space in a person's mind. And by freeing up that space, we increase efficiency. If you increase efficiency, you have less downstream effects that are negative. And so the patient immediately starts to feel better. But notice that I did not direct my work toward making them feel better. Making them feel better is a downstream effect of the processes that I'm working on. And to me, that's what doctoring actually is how to take a patient where they are and how to develop a strategy, not only to do in the office, but to help them do outside the office to give them power. And that's what they all want. They want to be in charge. You know, people are, I think we're getting to that point where our culture is saying, you know what, I'm tired of being a victim. And in a linear-based science, you have the victim and you have the champion. And I think people are fed up with it. And so they want more. And we are positioned to be the leaders in that whole way of thinking. And all we have to do is just embrace it, become the doctors that we actually were, we were given the degree of doctor, and we need to apply that to humanity.
When we looked at that definition of being a doctor, we knew that it meant being the educator.
Right.
And how much have we failed in being the educator about teaching our patients that there is another way of looking at this outside of that linear method of medicine where you treat symptoms,
right,
and just or back pain or neck pain. So we're as guilty as the ones we like to accuse of
absolutely,
of not meeting the needs of the patient.
Right. And I want to say this and be as kind as I can, but I want people to just stop and think for a moment. The creation of the vertebral subluxation is a downstream effect. It is not the upstream process. It is the downstream effect. And so if you focus your work on correcting the vertebral subluxation, you're actually working on the consequences of a process, and you'll never stop the process.
Therein lies the challenge of getting this across to the non-converted, I call them, the people they're still with the indoctrination that we had from schools that are still teaching this. Our chiropractic colleges and universities are still teaching that linear method.
And I think, honestly, the reason why is because the educational system that we've established in our country is a linear-based system, all right? And we've all seen these miracles happen in our practice, and we never really could explain it. And the reason why we couldn't explain it is because we were looking at it from a linear way of thinking. It just did not make sense, but it happens all the time. I mean, in medicine, when they have these miracles happen, they call it the placebo effect, because that is a linear explanation of something they cannot explain in their science.
Yeah. So all this is really very interesting. When we started out with this, we started with this structural model and bone on nerve. You and I did the same thing.
Right.
I had our challenges through the years of practice and seeing the changes. Now we come to this point where we're looking at chiropractic as a neurologically based event that alters brain function directly. We know that all the way to the hardwiring in the cortex.
Right.
It elevates the profession tremendously. It's not about structure or bad curves anymore. It's about brain function. So what has this done when you made this shift over in your practice? What's happened to your practice?
Oh, it's completely changed. When you look back at the practice, when my first practice was a structure-based, trauma-based practice. Even the name of the practice was called Pain Relief Plus. All right, that should give you some insight. And it was a huge practice. I had a therapy suite that would rival the hospitals. And we did quite well. But I was very dissatisfied in what I was doing because I knew that there was something more, and I was just unsettled. And so I moved that practice out, and I brought in a pediatric style practice because I thought, well, therein lies the answer. I just need to start earlier. But I was still doing the same application, just on a smaller frame. And then, you and I met, and you started asking these questions, and I started saying, I have these same questions. And then, we just kept going until we started realizing that, it's really not about the frame. The frame is an expression of how the nervous system is working. So we need to find some way of figuring out how the nervous system works. And then, lo and behold, Annette Long and her husband got involved with us, and it just continued to grow. I believe now what we are doing is the modern day early chiropractor. It's just that we have the technology to prove what these early chiropractors were talking about.
Talking about the technology, what technology did you start with, and what did you progress through to where we are now?
Oh, wow. When we started, we had the basic, diagnostics in the office. We did blood draws, and, we had our x-ray unit. We did a lot of orthopedic testing and neurological testing, from a pathological view, that linear based. And then we got introduced to SEMG and thermography. So of course I bought all that equipment and I used that, but I had questions when I would see patterns. And so I would ask the people who built the equipment about these patterns, and they would go, "Oh, don't worry about that." And I'm thinking, but that's the key. And then we just kept going. And now, of course, I use the NI unit, and I use a lot of brain technology as far as training in the office and outside.
Fantastic. You do a lot of biofeedback in your office too?
I do a good bit of biofeedback, and not only am I using the NI unit, I use a lot of biofeedback for patients at home.
You're using BrainTap, I do believe as well.
I use a lot of BrainTap in the office, and then I have patients purchase it for home use.
Super. I mean, that's the key of getting the people to make the shift so that they're doing their stuff at home. I don't know how much money I wasted with exercise sheets on pieces of paper that I gave to them, and you knew they never were going to do them.
Yeah, I remember having all the balls and the ropes and everything, mounted on the wall and laying around the office.
Yeah. And that it helps. The problem with doing those kind of exercises is, unless you're changing the neurological pattern, they're going to just practice the exercise with that same neurological pattern and literally reinforce it.
Well, not only that, they actually have it increases the potential of creating another downstream effect, all right, which is, following that same line of bad processing gives you a bad outcome.
So what's the patient response to the NeuroInfiniti in your office?
Oh, they absolutely love it. I can't tell you the number of people that we do this and they go, finally, somebody understands what's going on. Because the nice part about the education that we offer through NI is that you can literally sit down with a patient, you can shake their hand, and you can tell them everything about them. And that's the thing that, to me, every day when I come to work, I absolutely love predicting what I'm going to see when these new patients come in.
Yeah, seeing the new patients becomes a really an exciting thing, because you get to tell them and you watch them look at you like you're some sort of wizard when you start going like, so you're not sleeping well. How did you know that? I didn't know you got a stomach problem. How did you know that?
We go through, I know that you have the headaches, but the thing that I'm really interested in is, why are you grinding your teeth at night? And they go, how do you know that? And then we go on and we talk about all the other, the neurophysiological issues that are downstream issues associated with that. And the patients, they go, you're the only person who has ever understood what's going on.
And so those people with the chronic pain syndrome people and the people with autoimmune system disorders that everybody thinks is crazy, and you start making sense to them and you can make changes.
Yes, absolutely. And, and when you explain it to the patient that what they are suffering from is the consequence of bad processing, and regardless of what you have to do while you're in the ditch, if you don't learn how you got into the ditch, what's the odds of ever getting out?
When Dr. Aplin is talking about processing, I'm going back to processing. He's talking about how that brain is able to take the information in and make sense out of it and put out a proper action on the way out. That's what we're talking about, and that's one of the first things that stress affects, especially the prefrontal cortex area. That's so important. And then that also fires off the cerebellum. And, have you ever seen people that are under high levels of stress? They don't walk well. They don't function well. They don't have the coordination. They can't think their way through problems because that area of the brain that's responsible for that isn't working. That's the processing he's talking about when he was mentioning this throughout this. It's about the brain. Get a brain, doc. Get a brain. That's all I keep telling these people. So you've been teaching for NeuroInfiniti programs for a long time, for the chiropractic offices, neurologically based chiropractic offices for a long time. About 15 years now we've been doing the training programs, and you're the head guy that's been there throughout. What has happened to you over that training program from the time when we first started to where you are today at looking at chiropractic?
Certainty. That's what's happened. You know, I know when a patient comes in what we can do. There is no question that we can change things. It's just a matter of finding the correct application to make it work.
And then training over time, repetition over time.
That's all it is. And, you know, when we started, we had these ideas and we just didn't have the language. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
We had to develop a language. And, you know, and I think a lot of doctors have fear when it comes to language. They just don't know how to explain it. And that's the reason why we do the training and we have doctors that come back, you know, time and time again. It helps them with the language skills. And once we've done that, once we have that language correct, then patients start not only showing up for the right reasons, they start bringing in more people, because when they speak to them, they go, this doctor is totally different than anything you've ever met, anyone you've ever met. And so you need to go see and understand this. What I have patients say, and I guarantee you this will happen to the doctors. They will say, the patient will talk to someone and say, you need to see my doctor. They don't say, you need to see my chiropractor. You need to see my doctor. My doctor can help you.
Yeah, it's elevated the profession to a whole nother concept. We're not about backs and pain anymore. We're about something that's a much greater level of value to the people that are out there. So let's talk about a couple of things that's the bottom line on this, because this is one of the challenges we have with trying to get members of the profession interested in what we're doing. The first thing is time to do this. Does it take more time? How do you did this by yourself?
For a number of years, I did all the testing, all the training I did by myself. And so I would schedule patients in a way that I could do all the adjusting, and then run back and do the training. And then I could do all the adjusting, and I could do the testing. And I don't ever want to hear a doctor say that they're so busy they can't do this. I mean, that's just nonsense. It's just a matter of what you really want to do.
What were you seeing in number of patients in a day doing that?
I try to keep my practice right around 50 to 65 patients a day. And for me, that's what I want. You know, and we still, I mean, to this day, we still see all the new patients, do all the training. And I did all the testing back when we were, you know, seeing 50 to 65 patients a day. It's just how you schedule it.
I kept telling you were crazy, and you finally got you to hire somebody to do all of that. And that's the thing. You can either do it yourself, and if people think I don't have time, I'm going to have them talk to Dr. Rich Aplin, because he knows how to figure this thing out with time-wise. It's just about efficiency. It's about scheduling. I learned that when I was in practice. It's all about scheduling and knowing your limitations or where you want to be. So now let's go to the next one. What's it done for your income? I mean, let's get down to the hard part.
Well,
I'm not looking for exact numbers, but you can.
Okay. One, with that level of certainty that you have, your income's going up.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way around it. It will go up. You know, one of the things to think about in income in our profession we have to look at things like PVA, patient visit average. And your patient visit average will go up. Absolutely. And it takes less effort to get the PVA to go up. All it takes is consistency. Consistency with the message, consistency with your care. And you can add on a lot of additional features like the neurofeedback we add on, and that is, of course, going to increase, you know, your bottom line. The biofeedback, we do biofeedback testing. We do a lot of SEMG biofeedback with scoliosis and a lot of other, you know, structural phenomenon, or what we initially thought were structural. Now what we're finding out is it's actually a brain issue. But we're doing that, and of course that's add-on. We do the neuro retraining with the brain tap in the office and at home, and that's an add-on. So your income is going to go up dramatically.
So the retention levels have gone up sky high. And when you're talking about conversion, you're talking about conversion from new patient to going under care. And what about people when they finish that sort of initial stage about converting into long-term care?
Yeah, they honestly, they don't have a problem, and it actually begins at the very first report. When they understand that it's all about the process, they're like, okay, well, this is something that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, because life goes on.
Right. And you think about it, chiropractor or doctors of chiropractic, we honestly don't have a problem with that for ourselves or our family. But for whatever reason, in that exchange for money, we think that the patient has a problem with it. And we're actually doing them a disservice by entertaining that.
It's always been about a question of value, perceived value and real value. You know, if they're only coming in to get their pain relief, that's the value they want when they're shorting themselves a whole bunch of what chiropractic really has to offer. And it's hard on the chiropractor and it's hard on the patient, and you're not fulfilling the goals of chiropractic or what your job is.
Well, you know, and for me, that's the issue of identity. You know, my identity in my community is that I'm the expert in neurological issues. That's my identity. And so people who come to me, they want that kind of help. And they understand that it took 35, 40, 50 years to get here. It's going to take some time. And once we have that under control, then they also understand that this is an ongoing process. Life continues. And so my efficiency in processing can be enhanced by what this chiropractor or this doctor is doing for me.
So just to sort of close, there's a sort of a two-edged question here. One of them is that the idea of bringing in this piece of equipment and bringing in this concept, is it an investment or is it a cost? And where does the profession need to go? How important is this right now?
Well, you know, on the surface, when you first look at it, you could, you know, try to juggle the notion that it's an investment and it's a cost. You know, initially you may say, okay, if I'm a forward-thinking doctor, then it's an investment. If I'm looking for another widget, it's a cost. Right? And that really is what it comes down to. But what people need to understand is that the market is changing. And if you go back and look at medicine, their market has changed. All right. Neurology is coming on. It doesn't matter whose research you pick up, whether it's chiropractic, you know, podiatry, psychiatry, radiology, you know, general medicine, orthopedics, whatever. You're going to see more and more research coming out about the brain. I mean, it is on every newscast. It's talking about the brain. We actually have the opportunity as chiropractors, because we don't even know, or we've lost that knowledge, that we actually are influencing brain function. We were the keepers. We always have been. We just lost the knowledge. We replaced it with something else. But now we're getting it back, and we have an opportunity really to corner the market, I guess, if you want to put it that way. You know, the thing that we've really pushed in this practice is we want to create an entity that is a standalone. It's not the opposite of something. And see, for so many years, doctors of chiropractic have you know, operated as if they're not medical doctors. And I mean, I've heard all sorts of notions, you know, of getting out doing public speaking and say, you know, we're not medical doctors, we don't treat disease. Well, you're defining yourself by something else. And so you're not really defining yourself. You have no identity. You're like the uncola, okay? You know, and you're always second. You know, that just doesn't sit well with me. And so my identity is based on what, you know, the neurology and how the brain actually works. And so I can work in concert with a medical doctor, and I can explain to the medical doctor that I can actually make his work better. And as a result, I mean, I've got a lot of medical doctors that refer to me continually, just routinely.
So your message to all the people that have been the tire kickers and the looky-loos and the people that are struggling in the chiropractic profession and the people that aren't happy being back pain specialists and listening to people complain, what would you say to them in a simple sentence?
In a simple sentence, you may look at this, with this question that you had, whether it's an investment or a cost. If you don't do something now, I think it's foolish not to, honestly. If you don't, it's going to become a necessity. And when it becomes a necessity in practice, you're behind. It's too late. Yeah. And so you have the opportunity. You have a piece of equipment that you honestly could purchase and go into practice and never have to purchase anything else. Right? It can run everything. It can help you observe how the nervous system actually works. It can help you exercise. It can help you train. It can do all sorts of things. And so, the new chiropractor, if you have any new chiropractors watching, I encourage them, bite the bullet and purchase this and understand that it is going to pay you back dividends, all right, and for a long time.
That's the whole point of this. And Dr. Aplin, I want to say thank you for your time. I love the snow days, so we can get a chance to do this. We don't do it often enough, you and I. I miss some of those old days. So I wanted to say, from one RVer to another, even though your RV has 2 wheels and mine has like 8, 10, we'll see you somewhere down the road.
Absolutely. Take care.